we need transformation of food systems. Let me add a spice to that, because we are talking about food. We are going through a global food systems reset. So let me repeat. I think we are going through a global food systems reset. It is just that we have to recognize, we have to internalize at the national levels, and we have to externalize at the multilateral level. And that is what I think we are going to discuss now, that what are the pathways, the governance systems that would actually recognize, internalize, and so on and so forth. Point is that on the food security, we are all doing fantastic in our own domains. None of the government can be blamed for not doing anything on food security, because that's important. None of the international organizations could be blamed, regardless of our efficiency, resources, and other frameworks. But do we have a global system that takes account of all of these things and really create a synergy? And that is what we would like to discuss today with two speakers from the private sector and public sector. So let me start with, since it's a fireside chat, let me fire a very quick question without going into details. Let's start with Excellency Mohammed Al Amiri from the public sector perspective, because UAE is known for innovations. Excellent. I mean, we really envy the innovations done at the UAE level. But in your government's perspective, what could be the multilateral global governance system for the food security? I mean, in addition to these FAOs, IFADs, Rome-based agencies, the Committee on Food Security, we don't have anything that really binds us together except the word food security. So what extra could be done? I mean, what could be the multilateral policy pathway, in your view, that would bind us to basically transform the food systems? From your government's perspective, what do you think would be the probable pathway going further at the global level?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for the question, Your Excellency. According to the estimates compiled by the FAO, by 2050, we will need to produce 60% more food for 9.3 billion population in the world. And doing that with a farming as usual approach will take too heavy toll on our natural resources. So conventional way is no more good. So we have to go to innovation, technology, and around these topics. In our approach to resolve these things in the government is introducing the private sector. You mentioned about the international organization. While SDGs to emphasize on the urgency of the tackling food insecurity around the world, but unfortunately, we are running behind. So we have to do something in this regard. In UAE, we are introducing the private sector to be part or tool to facilitate, and so there will be two parts. The government will facilitate, will develop legislation, policies, and we need business tools or arms, which will be the private sector. So we lately developed in UAE, for example, here, the Islamic Processing Food Bound. This will be centralized in United Arab Emirates and will work under the Islamic Organization for Food Security. We will link different continents, MENA area, Asia, and Africa. As UAE, we consider as international hub for food trade. So we will link all these countries in this continent under and with, of course, support of international organization. This one tools. Second tools, introduce technology, innovation. Okay, in the agribusiness, which is not in that hoped level until now, which will lead us to support startup business, researchers, and entrepreneurs to come up with more and more technology, even small technology, small solar panel with a small net house. It means reduction in natural resources. This the ministry has emphasized and approaching, supporting research and development, innovations, and startup business by linking them by fund boxes. And like we have in UAE, for example, Mubadala, Abu Dhabi Investment, and others, we are coordinating with them and working with them to support this, to introduce technology in our agriculture sector. Besides that, we have good coordination with our strategic partner in different countries, okay, which they have maybe some advanced technology. We are coordinating with them to introduce this kind of technology worldwide with other countries. In GCC, we are coordinating with our colleagues and counterparts in GCC countries from regulatory basis, from introducing and emphasizing and facilitating food movement and joint food security projects. Lately, I been part of a panel, and the main subject was producing food from sea and desert. So we're talking about alternative protein, we're talking about alternative food from algae, from seaweed, okay, beside cultivated meat. This novel food also, Her Excellency, one of the main supporter for this novel food, which we will be as a main part of our coming approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency Al-Amiri. Very innovative initiatives, and I'm sure we can internationalize many of these things. So let's move to the second part of the solution, the private sector, which I must say in the global food security debates often underrated or underrepresented. NEER is representing one of the companies, the Good Food Initiative or Institute, sorry. So NEER, what do you think in terms of, we are talking about the governance, we know that in terms of technology, private sector is probably far ahead than the governments, but how can you contribute in having a global governance system on food security that is efficient, resilient, all of these things?
I was just about to discuss the technology gap. So first of all, let's acknowledge that our challenge is huge. We heard a lot today about the triangle between water, energy, and food. And when it comes to water and energy, there's just a limited amount of ways humanity can produce, transfer, and consume water and energy. And we are making significant advancements in these areas. When it comes to food, the global food system is much more diverse, much more complicated, and getting to the right solutions that can be a part of a global change that leave no one behind is much more complicated. Now, oftentimes in these types of summits and conferences, there is an elephant in the room, and the elephant is usually, in the matter of food security, it's actually a cow. Humanity uses, as you all know, 70% of fresh water and of agricultural land, and more than 73% of antibiotics, etc., to make food using animals in factory farming. This is a huge challenge that must be addressed. And one of the solutions, it's not the only one, but it's definitely a very relevant one, is alternative protein and food tech. And here I come to the gap between the private sector, as you mentioned, and governments, because there is a lot of very healthy skepticism that I hear from, especially when I talk to multilateral organizations such as the FAO. From the government perspective and the multilaterals, the question is, can those technologies really address the global needs of the disadvantaged, of the global south? Are they able to go to market in the right price, in the right taste, as was mentioned earlier, in the right time? A lot of healthy skepticism. On the other end, from the private sector, we see that most of the food technologies worldwide, the startups, the big food companies, they are being financed by the private sector, by venture capital, and they are addressing the global north, the developed countries. And with food, that means that we are targeting different taste patterns, different cultural patterns, and different price points. There is a gap nowadays. And if I may call for the international sector here and the government sector, is let's solve this gap. And nowadays we have an opportunity. With the markets in decline, the global food tech sector is striving for investments. We are suffering from a significant decline in investments. On the other hand, the acknowledgement of food security as a serious security issue around the globe within government is on the rise. So I think that nowadays, in 2023, with COP coming to the UAE, we have an opportunity to close that gap.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And if I may extend that argument, I think the governments normally take food security more from an availability perspective, as our ADG mentioned. But who would fill these nutrition gaps? Who would do these technologies and so on and so forth? So certainly, that is a very important point in order to recognize or enhance the role of the private sector. Now, since we are really over time, two quick follow-up questions. If you have to advise to the governments, to both of you gentlemen, two immediate policy actions by all of the governments in the globe, but particularly our region, the MENA region, what those immediate two policy actions would be or should be, in your view? So let's start with the private sector, and then we can go to the others. Neil, what would you say to the governments?
In our region, specifically in the Middle East and Northern Africa, we are in a time where we know more than other areas in the world how significant food security is to our general security. There are things happening in this region that do not happen in other areas, and the incentive for governments is very, very clear. Now, what needs to happen is that we need to develop knowledge and technologies that are relevant to our region, to the way that we want to produce and consume food. And the current advancements in food technology allow us, for the first time in history, to create food from the bottom up. We can utilize cells and plants to create locally meat and dairy and relieve our very busy and complicated supply chains. Now, my day job, when I'm not speaking in festive global summits, is to work with governments around the world to create national policy plans for the food security technologies and alternative proteins. Nowadays, I'm working with the governments of Germany, China, the United States, and Israel. And those governments are putting together plans that are comprehensive and that take into account the part of this specific country in the global food supply chain. Now, in Israel, we are emphasizing innovation, for example, and the Israeli government is going to adopt our recommendation to invest more than $500 million in the next 4 years in creating a global innovation hub. Similar things are happening here in the UAE and in Singapore, for example. But other governments need to acknowledge what is their role in the future of the food supply chain and develop nation-specific policy plans, and this is something that we at the Good Food Institute would be happy to advise on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Al-Amiri, your two policy advices to the various governments.
It's important, actually, to move from conventional farming or agriculture to the modern or novel food you have to change some regulation to make it easy, okay, to adopt this new technology or new novel food. Then to promote with the consumers, you know, that at the end, the consumer taste, okay, will impact on the distribution and expansion of this kind of cultivated or cellular meat. So important the government develop new legislation, new policy, actually, so can make the private sector or researcher or startup easier for them, actually, to expand in this kind of production. And facilitate with other fund tools to support this startup business, okay, by facilitating fund for them. From infrastructure, from production part, this is what the government can do now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Since we were really over time even before start, we have to close. But if I may leave with just last one food for thought. Her Excellency Minister has gone, but you are there and other colleagues are there. My, let's say, humble contribution would be that UAE is the best place to really host a platform for the global or improved global governance on food systems. You have already initiated many of the initiatives, so why not to have a global food security governance hub based in UAE, where the tripartite coalitions, the governments, international organizations, and private sectors sit together, discuss, and carve out the policy pathways that really sort of, guides the global food security things. We do have a similar mechanism, by the way. It is called the Committee on World Food Security that is housed in the FAO, but that has a very different mandate. It is a meeting place. It is not a place where you design the policies to be implemented. So that is the last food for thought for UAE, but sorry for taking too much of the time. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thanks a lot.